A woman was home alone when robbers broke in, ransacking her house and stealing everything of value. But the cruelest blow came when they took her beloved dog, leaving her heartbroken and desperate. But hours later, when firefighters responded to a mysterious call in the neighborhood, what they discovered in an abandoned building left everyone stunned. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment which part of the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you how all of this happened. "Good morning, old friend," Eleanor Thompson whispered as Duke's cold nose pressed against her wrinkled hand. The black Labrador's tail thumped against the bedroom floor, creating a steady rhythm that had awakened Eleanor every morning for the past 5 years. The clock on her bedside table showed 7 o'clock. Eleanor didn't need an alarm anymore. Duke was better than any clock. She slowly pushed herself up from the bed, her joints creaking in protest after 80 years of use. "Just give me a minute to get these old bones moving," she told Duke, who sat patiently by the bedroom door, his amber eyes never leaving her face. Eleanor's small yellow house on Pine Street in Lakewood, Connecticut, was quiet except for the soft padding of Duke's paws following her to the kitchen. She filled the kettle and placed it on the stove for her morning tea. "Chamomile today, I think," she said to Duke, who tilted his head as if considering her choice. "Yes, I know you'd prefer breakfast over tea talk." After pouring her tea and filling Duke's bowl with food, Eleanor looked out her kitchen window at the street beginning to wake up. Mrs. Henderson across the way was getting her newspaper. The Collins children were waiting for the school bus, their colorful backpacks visible from Eleanor's window. "After breakfast, we'll take our walk," Eleanor promised, patting Duke's head. "Same route as always." 30 minutes later, Eleanor and Duke stepped out into the crisp autumn morning. Eleanor wore her blue coat with the big buttons that Robert had always said matched her eyes. Duke walked beside her, no leash needed. He never strayed from her side. Their route through Miller Park was so familiar that Eleanor could have walked it with her eyes closed. They passed Mrs. Sanders' house first, where the plump woman was sweeping her porch. "Morning, Eleanor." "Morning, Duke," Mrs. Sanders called, reaching into her pocket. "I've got a treat for my favorite dog in Lakewood." Duke sat perfectly still as Mrs. Sanders approached with a dog biscuit. "You spoil him," Eleanor said with a smile. "He deserves it. Best behaved dog in town," Mrs. Sanders replied. "How are you feeling today?" "Oh, same as yesterday. These old knees complain a bit more each winter. But we keep moving, don't we, Duke?" As they continued their walk, Mr. Johnson tipped his hat from his garden. "Fine morning, Mrs. Thompson." "Indeed it is, Mr. Johnson. Your roses are looking lovely." The park was quiet at this hour. Eleanor sat on her usual bench while Duke sniffed around the nearby bushes, never going too far. "Robert would have loved this morning," Eleanor said softly. Duke returned to her side, resting his head on her knee as if he understood. 5 years without him now. Sometimes I still turn to tell him something. Duke's warm presence was a comfort Eleanor relied on more than she cared to admit. When Robert died, the house had seemed too big, too empty, too quiet. Duke filled those spaces with his quiet companionship. Back home, Eleanor spent her afternoon watching game shows and baking cookies for the neighborhood children who would stop by after school. Duke napped at her feet, occasionally opening one eye when the contestants on television shouted answers. "They never guessed the right price," Eleanor told Duke. "Robert was always good at that game." Photos of Robert filled the house, their wedding day, vacations to the Grand Canyon, the day they brought Duke home as a puppy. Eleanor often found herself talking to these photos when she thought Duke wasn't listening. As evening fell, Eleanor prepared a simple dinner for herself and added an extra scoop to Duke's bowl. "My children called earlier," she told Duke as they ate. "They won't visit until Christmas. Boston and California are just so far away." Duke looked up from his bowl, his eyes fixed on her. "At least I have you." After washing her dinner plate, Eleanor settled into her armchair to watch her favorite Tuesday night game show. Duke curled up at her feet, his steady breathing a comforting sound in the quiet house. Outside, across the street, 2 men sat in a dark car watching Eleanor's house. They had been there for 3 nights now, noting her routine. "She's alone except for the dog," the taller one said. "Goes to bed at 9:30 sharp." "What about the dog?" asked the other, a man with a snake tattoo peeking from beneath his sleeve. "Labs are worth good money. We'll take it too." Eleanor, unaware of the eyes watching her home, turned off her television and prepared for bed. Duke followed her through her nightly routine, checking the locks, turning off lights, brushing her teeth. "Another day done," Eleanor said, climbing into bed. Duke settled at her feet, a warm, protective presence. "Good night, old friend. Tomorrow will be just the same." But tomorrow would not be the same at all. The sound of glass breaking shattered the quiet of Eleanor's living room. She jolted upright in her armchair, the game show still playing on the television. Duke's head snapped up, ears alert. "What was that?" Eleanor whispered, her heart pounding. Before Duke could respond with more than a low growl, the back door burst open. Two masked men rushed into her living room. The taller one wore a black ski mask and had a raspy voice that sent chills down Eleanor's spine. "Don't move, lady," he ordered, pointing at her with a gloved hand. The shorter man had a snake tattoo visible on his wrist as he began yanking drawers open. "Where's the good stuff?" he demanded. Eleanor sat frozen in her chair, her body trembling. Duke barked loudly, placing himself between Eleanor and the intruders. "Please," Eleanor begged, her voice barely audible. "Take whatever you want, but please don't hurt us." The men ignored her pleas as they tore through her home. The tall one ripped family photos off the walls, checking behind them for a safe. The shorter one dumped her jewelry box onto the dining table. "Jackpot," he said, holding up the pearl necklace Robert had given her on their 40th anniversary. "The old lady's got some nice stuff." Eleanor watched helplessly as they stuffed Robert's watches and her wedding ring into their pockets. The tall man found her emergency money in the cookie jar in the kitchen. $600, he counted. Not bad for an old lady. Duke continued barking, his body tense and protective. The tall man turned his attention to the dog. "Shut that mutt up," he told his partner. "Wait," said the shorter man, examining Duke more carefully. "This is a purebred Labrador. Looks well trained, too." The tall man nodded and approached Duke with a calculating look in his eyes. "Nice dog," he said, grabbing Duke's collar roughly. "He'll fetch a good price." Duke growled, showing his teeth, but the man yanked hard on his collar. "No!" Eleanor cried, rising from her chair. "Please don't take him. Take my television, take anything else, but please leave Duke. I have another $500 in my bedroom," she pleaded. "It's yours if you leave my dog." The tall man laughed. "We'll take the money and the dog, Grandma." Eleanor tried to reach for Duke, but the shorter man pushed her back into her chair. Duke fought against his captor, his nails scratching across the hardwood floor as he struggled to stay with Eleanor. "Duke!" Eleanor cried as they dragged him toward the door. Duke's eyes never left hers, filled with confusion and fear. "Be quiet, or we'll come back for you," the tall man threatened, before they disappeared into the night with Duke. Eleanor's hands shook so badly she could barely dial 911. Tears streamed down her face as she reported the break-in. Within 15 minutes, Officer James Parker arrived at her door. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked gently. "I'm Officer Parker. Are you hurt?" Eleanor shook her head. "They took Duke," she sobbed. "They took my dog." Officer Parker guided her to the couch and took notes as she described the intruders. He walked through the ransacked house, stopping on the back porch where he found a cigarette butt with a distinct red band. "This might help us identify them," he said, carefully placing it in an evidence bag. "I'm going to put out an alert for your dog right away." "Will you find him?" Eleanor asked, clutching Duke's favorite toy, a worn tennis ball. Officer Parker's expression softened. "We'll do everything we can, Mrs. Thompson. Home invasions are serious crimes, and pet theft is something we take very seriously." But Eleanor saw the doubt in his eyes. He didn't think they would find Duke. "Do you have someone who can stay with you tonight?" Officer Parker asked. "A neighbor or family member?" "My neighbor Sarah might come over," Eleanor replied, her voice hollow. After Officer Parker left, promising to return in the morning, Eleanor sat alone in her living room. Duke's water bowl still sat in the kitchen. His bed remained in the corner. But Duke was gone. Eleanor clutched the tennis ball to her chest, tears falling freely now. The house felt emptier than it had even after Robert died. Back then, she'd had Duke to comfort her. Now she truly was alone. "I'll find you," she whispered into the darkness. "I promise, Duke. I'll find you somehow." Morning light crept through Eleanor's curtains, illuminating her tired face. She hadn't slept all night, her eyes red and swollen from crying. The sound of a gentle knock at the door startled her. "Eleanor? It's Sarah from next door. Officer Parker called me." Eleanor opened the door to find her neighbor holding a bag of groceries and wearing a concerned expression. "Oh, Eleanor," Sarah said, pulling her into a hug. "I'm so sorry about Duke." "I need to find him," Eleanor said, her voice stronger than it had been last night. "I won't just sit here and wait." "What can I do to help?" Sarah asked. Within an hour, Eleanor had withdrawn $2,000 from her savings account, money she'd been keeping for emergencies. This was certainly an emergency. "We'll make missing posters," Eleanor told Sarah, "with Duke's picture and my phone number." At the print shop downtown, the owner, Mr. Davis, listened to Eleanor's story with growing concern. "I'll print 500 posters for you at no charge," he said. "My wife and I have 3 dogs. I can't imagine what you're going through." "Thank you," Eleanor said, her hands trembling as she handed him a recent photo of Duke. "He has a white spot on his chest, shaped like a diamond. Please make sure that shows clearly." By noon, Eleanor and Sarah had hung posters throughout Lakewood. The local coffee shop, grocery stores, and library all displayed Duke's picture prominently. "Missing dog. Black Labrador named Duke. Stolen during home robbery. $2,000 reward. Please call Eleanor Thompson." The posters showed Duke sitting proudly, his amber eyes looking directly at the camera. At the police station, Officer Parker introduced Eleanor to Detective Maria Gonzalez, a woman with kind eyes and a determined expression. "Mrs. Thompson, I specialize in property crimes," Detective Gonzalez explained. "Officer Parker briefed me on what happened. I'm treating this very seriously." "Have you found anything yet?" Eleanor asked. Detective Gonzalez unfolded a map on her desk. "We've had 3 similar cases in nearby towns over the past 2 months. Elderly residents living alone, home invasions, and in each case, a purebred dog was taken." "So it's not just Duke?" Eleanor asked. "No, ma'am. I believe we're dealing with an organized group specifically targeting older people who live alone. They're watching routines, waiting until they know the pattern of the household." Eleanor shuddered at the thought of being watched. "Will you find them?" "We're working on it," Detective Gonzalez said. "The cigarette butt Officer Parker found might give us DNA, and we're checking security cameras from businesses near your home." Back at Eleanor's house, Sarah convinced her to eat a sandwich, but Eleanor barely took 2 bites. "You need to keep up your strength," Sarah urged. "Duke will need you to be strong when he comes home." "When?" Eleanor repeated, clinging to that word. "Not if." That afternoon, the editor of the Lakewood Gazette, Mrs. Bennett, came to interview Eleanor. "We're putting Duke's story on the front page of tomorrow's paper," Mrs. Bennett promised. "Everyone in town will be looking for him." As word spread, Eleanor's phone began ringing. The principal of Lakewood Elementary called to say the school was organizing search parties for the weekend. The local pet store donated dog treats to give to volunteers. The town's Facebook page shared Duke's photo, which was quickly shared hundreds of times. Each evening, Eleanor walked through town calling Duke's name until her voice gave out. Sarah would find her sitting on benches, exhausted but unwilling to go home. At the police station, Detective Gonzalez pinned the locations of all dog thefts on a map. They formed a clear pattern along Highway 27, suggesting the thieves used the highway for quick escapes. "They're moving the dogs quickly," Detective Gonzalez told Officer Parker, "possibly selling them in other states." 7 days after Duke was taken, Eleanor fell asleep in her armchair, still clutching Duke's leash. She hadn't slept in her bed since he was taken. It felt too empty without him at her feet. Across town, Detective Gonzalez's phone rang. Another elderly woman's dog had been stolen. Same method, same description of the thieves. The pattern was continuing, and Duke was still missing. 3 weeks had passed since Duke was taken. Eleanor sat on her couch, staring at the phone that rarely rang anymore. Her clothes hung loose on her thin frame. She hadn't been eating well. "Eleanor, please take your medicine," Sarah said, holding out the pills Dr. Wilson had prescribed. "You need to keep up your strength." "I don't want those pills." Eleanor pushed the medicine away. "They make me sleepy. I need to stay alert for when Duke comes home." Sarah sighed but didn't argue. She had been coming by every day, bringing food Eleanor barely touched. "The whole town is talking about the fundraiser tonight," Sarah said, trying to sound cheerful. "The high school gym will be packed." Eleanor nodded slowly. "I should get dressed then." That evening, the Lakewood High School gymnasium was filled with hundreds of people. Colorful posters with Duke's picture hung on the walls. Local businesses had donated items for a silent auction: gift baskets, restaurant certificates, and handmade quilts. Eleanor sat in a chair near the entrance, thanking people as they arrived. Officer Parker stood nearby, keeping a watchful eye on her. "How are you holding up?" he asked during a quiet moment. "I'm still here," Eleanor replied. "That's something." Mayor Wilson stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. "Good evening, Lakewood," he began. "We're here tonight for our friend Eleanor Thompson and her beloved Duke." He paused as the crowd applauded. "Today, I'm announcing a town-wide dog watch program, like Neighborhood Watch, but focused on keeping our pets safe." More applause filled the gym. Eleanor managed a small smile. In the back of the room, 12-year-old Tommy Sanders watched with serious eyes. His grandmother had told him all about Eleanor and Duke. Tommy had been visiting from Boston for Thanksgiving break, but had convinced his parents to let him stay longer. "I made this website," Tommy told his friend Jack, showing him a phone screen. "It tracks all the Duke sightings people report." "Cool," Jack said. "My dad printed 500 more flyers. We can take them to Bedford and Westville tomorrow." By the end of the night, the fundraiser had raised $5,000 to add to Eleanor's reward. Detective Gonzalez announced the new total to cheers from the crowd. As people began to leave, Detective Gonzalez's phone rang. She stepped outside to answer it. "This is Detective Gonzalez." "I know who took the dogs," a young male voice whispered. "Meet me at the mall food court tomorrow at noon. Come alone." "Who is this?" she asked. But the caller had already hung up. The next day, Detective Gonzalez waited at the mall food court, watching every entrance. Noon came and went. At 12:30, she accepted that no one was coming. Back at the station, she reviewed security footage from the mall. A teenage boy in a blue hoodie had used the payphone near the east entrance, then ran away immediately after making the call. "He was scared," Officer Parker said, watching the video. "Maybe someone saw him." That evening, Eleanor opened her front door to get the newspaper. On her doorstep sat a small cardboard box. No return address, no name. With shaking hands, Eleanor carried the box inside and placed it on her kitchen table. She carefully opened it, then gasped. Inside lay Duke's collar, the blue one with the silver name tag. Underneath was a handwritten note: "Stop looking or the dog dies." Eleanor's hands trembled as she lifted the phone to call Detective Gonzalez. The collar was proof Duke was still alive, but the threat meant someone was watching her, angry about the search efforts. As tears rolled down her cheeks, Eleanor held Duke's collar tight against her heart. She would never stop looking for him, no matter what dangers came her way. Detective Gonzalez arrived at Eleanor's house within 20 minutes of her call. She carefully placed Duke's collar in an evidence bag. "We'll test this for fingerprints," she explained to Eleanor. "But I need to ask you something important. Are you going to stop searching?" Eleanor straightened her back and looked directly into Detective Gonzalez's eyes. "Absolutely not. I will never stop looking for Duke." "That's what I thought you'd say," Detective Gonzalez smiled slightly. "We'll increase patrols around your house to keep you safe." The next morning, Tommy Sanders arrived at the police station with a notebook full of information. Officer Parker led him to Detective Gonzalez's desk. "Detective, this is Tommy Sanders. He says he has something important to tell you." Tommy opened his notebook, revealing carefully drawn charts and calendars. "I've been studying the dog thefts," he explained. Every single one happened on rainy nights. The next heavy rain is forecast for tomorrow evening. Detective Gonzalez studied Tommy's notes. You're right. How did we miss this? I think they choose rainy nights because fewer people are outside walking or looking out their windows, Tommy said. Smart thinking. Detective Gonzalez patted Tommy's shoulder. We'll set up special patrols tomorrow night in areas where we think they might strike next. That evening, just after 9 o'clock, a call came into the Lakewood Fire Department. Smoke reported at the abandoned Lakewood textile factory on River Road, the dispatcher announced. Fire Chief Michael Rodriguez responded immediately. All units, this is a priority call. The old factory has dangerous chemicals inside. Lieutenant Sofia Ramirez was first to arrive with her team. The large brick building had been empty for years, its windows boarded up and weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. Looks like a small fire in the northeast corner, she reported into her radio. We can see smoke, but no visible flames. The firefighters broke through a chained door and entered the dusty building. They found a metal trash barrel with a small fire burning inside. Probably homeless people trying to stay warm, Chief Rodriguez said. Let's put it out and check the rest of the building to make sure there aren't more fires. The team split up to search the factory's many rooms. Lieutenant Ramirez and her partner took the west wing, shining their flashlights through the darkness. As they passed a locked storage room, Lieutenant Ramirez stopped suddenly. Did you hear that? She asked. Her partner shook his head. Hear what? A whimpering sound, like an animal in pain. They listened carefully. A faint noise came from behind the locked door. Someone could be hurt in there, Lieutenant Ramirez said. She called over her radio. Chief, we need the entry tools at the west storage room. Using a hydraulic spreader, they forced the door open. Lieutenant Ramirez shined her flashlight inside and gasped. Oh my God, she whispered. 7 dogs were chained to pipes along the wall. All were thin and dirty. Some had wounds on their legs and faces. In the corner, barely able to stand, was a black Labrador with a white diamond-shaped spot on his chest. It's Duke, Lieutenant Ramirez said, recognizing him from the posters all over town. And look at all these other dogs. Her partner pointed to a table where a notebook lay open. Chief needs to see this. The notebook contained detailed information about each dog, owner names, addresses, and daily routines. One page showed a German Shepherd that belonged to Thomas Gardner, a 75-year-old Vietnam veteran who needed the dog for his PTSD. Another page showed a rare golden retriever puppy that had been stolen from the Lakewood Animal Shelter the day before it was to be sent to the Children's Hospital. Lieutenant Ramirez knelt beside Duke, who was too weak to even bark. She gently stroked his head. We found you, buddy, she said softly. We found all of you. Chief Rodriguez called Detective Gonzalez while the other firefighters brought water for the dogs. We need animal control and police at the old textile factory right away, he said. We just found 7 stolen dogs, including Eleanor Thompson's Duke. As Lieutenant Ramirez waited for help to arrive, Duke raised his head slightly and licked her hand. You're going home, she promised him. You're finally going home. Dr. Amanda Chen worked through the entire night at Lakewood Animal Hospital. The clock on the wall showed it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning, but she couldn't stop yet. Duke needed her help. His body temperature is still too low, Dr. Chen told her assistant, and he's lost nearly 20 pounds. Get me another warming blanket. Duke lay on the examination table, his eyes half closed. An IV dripped fluids into his thin body. The other 6 rescued dogs were in similar condition, each in their own treatment area. Will he make it? The assistant asked. Duke is a fighter, Dr. Chen said, gently stroking his head, but the next 24 hours are critical. As the sun rose over Lakewood, Officer Parker drove his police car to Eleanor's house. When she opened the door, he saw hope flicker in her tired eyes. Did you find something? Eleanor asked. Mrs. Thompson, we found Duke, Officer Parker said gently. He's alive. He's at Lakewood Animal Hospital right now. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Take me to him, please. Take me right now. The waiting room at the animal hospital was filled with people. Thomas Gardner, the Vietnam veteran, sat in his wheelchair, waiting for news about his service dog. A family with 2 young children waited to hear about the therapy dog meant for the children's hospital. Eleanor's legs shook as Dr. Chen approached her. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Dr. Chen. Duke is stable but very weak. Would you like to see him?" "Yes, please," Eleanor whispered. Dr. Chen led Eleanor to a quiet room where Duke lay on a soft bed. His bones showed through his skin, and tubes connected him to machines that beeped softly. When Duke heard Eleanor's voice, his tail moved just slightly. His amber eyes opened wider, and he made a small whimpering sound. "Oh, Duke," Eleanor said, kneeling beside him. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she gently touched his head. "I never gave up on you." Dr. Chen explained Duke's condition. "He's severely dehydrated and malnourished. He needs to stay here for a few days so we can monitor him and give him fluids." "I'm not leaving him," Eleanor said firmly. "I'll stay right here." Dr. Chen nodded. "I'll have a chair brought in for you." For the next 3 days, Eleanor barely left Duke's side. She talked to him softly for hours, telling him about all the people who had helped search for him. She fed him small amounts of food by hand when Dr. Chen said it was safe. "Small bites, Duke," she would say. "We need to build your strength slowly." Meanwhile, Detective Gonzalez and her team examined the evidence from the factory. The notebook revealed a sophisticated operation targeting elderly pet owners. They weren't just random thefts, Detective Gonzalez told Officer Parker. They specifically chose valuable or specially trained dogs, and they studied their victims for weeks. Security cameras from businesses near the factory showed a blue van visiting several times. The license plate was partially visible in one frame. "We're getting closer," Detective Gonzalez said. "This is the break we needed." On the 4th day, Dr. Chen checked Duke's vital signs and smiled. "His blood work is improving, and he's gained 2 pounds, she told Eleanor. "I think he's strong enough to go home tomorrow." Eleanor stroked Duke's head. "Did you hear that, boy? We're going home." That afternoon, Duke stood on his own for the first time since his rescue. His legs trembled with the effort, but he managed to walk a few steps to where Eleanor sat. "Good boy," Eleanor said, her voice breaking with emotion. Duke pressed his head against her hand, his eyes never leaving her face. "He won't let you out of his sight for a while," Dr. Chen warned. "He may have some anxiety and fear after what he's been through." Eleanor nodded. "We'll work through it together. No one will ever take him from me again." As Duke rested his head on Eleanor's lap, she made a silent promise to him and to herself. This wasn't just about getting Duke back. It was about making sure no one else would ever experience what they had gone through. Duke pushed his nose against Eleanor's bedroom door, whining softly until she opened it. Even though he'd been home for 2 weeks, he still couldn't bear to let Eleanor out of his sight. "I'm just getting dressed, Duke," Eleanor said gently. "I'm not going anywhere without you." Duke's behavior had changed since his rescue. The once confident dog now startled at loud noises and followed Eleanor from room to room. At night, instead of sleeping on his bed in the corner, he lay pressed against her bedroom door. Eleanor's home had changed too. New deadbolts secured both doors, and a security system she could barely afford had been installed the previous week. "There," she said, punching in the code to deactivate the alarm. "Let's have breakfast." As Duke ate from his bowl, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Detective Gonzalez. "Mrs. Thompson, we've identified one suspect from the factory security footage. His name is Kevin Walters, and he has a history of property crimes. We're bringing him in for questioning today." "Did he take Duke?" Eleanor asked, her hand tightening around the phone. "We believe he was involved, but we're still looking for the others. I'll keep you updated." Later that afternoon, Detective Gonzalez sat across from Kevin Walters in the interrogation room. The thin man with tattoos covering both arms fidgeted in his chair. "We found your fingerprints at the factory, Kevin," Detective Gonzalez said, "and we have you on camera entering the building multiple times." "I was just paid to train the dogs," Kevin insisted. "I don't know who stole them or who was in charge." "You expect me to believe that? Look, I needed money. Some guy paid me $500 a week to train the dogs to be quiet around strangers. That's all I did." Detective Gonzalez didn't believe him, but without more evidence, she couldn't hold him. Meanwhile, Tommy Sanders continued his investigation from his grandmother's computer. The 12-year-old had created a detailed spreadsheet of all the stolen dogs. "Grandma, look at this," Tommy said, pointing to his screen. "Every dog that was stolen was special somehow. Duke was super well trained. Mr. Gardner's dog was a service dog. The shelter dog was a rare breed worth thousands of dollars." "You should tell Detective Gonzalez," Mrs. Sanders suggested. "I will. I think whoever took these dogs knew exactly what they were looking for." That evening, Lieutenant Sofia Ramirez knocked on Eleanor's door. Duke began barking immediately. "It's okay, Duke," Eleanor soothed, checking through the peephole before opening the door. "It's the firefighter who found you." Lieutenant Ramirez smiled. "I brought something for Duke," she said, holding out a special tag with the fire department logo. "For his new collar." As Eleanor invited her in, Duke positioned himself between Eleanor and the door, standing alert and watchful. "He's being very protective," Lieutenant Ramirez observed, kneeling slowly to Duke's level. "May I?" Eleanor nodded, and Lieutenant Ramirez gently offered her hand for Duke to sniff. "I grew up with dogs," Lieutenant Ramirez explained as Duke cautiously approached her. "They remember trauma differently than we do. He's protecting you now because he couldn't before." "Will he ever be the same?" Eleanor asked. "Not exactly the same," Lieutenant Ramirez said honestly, "but with time and love, he'll feel safe again." As they talked, Lieutenant Ramirez shared stories about growing up with her family's German Shepherd. Eleanor made tea, and for the first time since Duke's return, she felt a sense of normalcy. After Lieutenant Ramirez left, Eleanor attached the new tag to Duke's collar. "Look at that, Duke. You're an honorary firefighter now." At the police station, Detective Gonzalez was reviewing security footage again when her phone rang. "Detective, this is Officer Martinez from County. We just got a tip about a dogfighting ring operating out of an abandoned warehouse in Westville. The caller mentioned seeing dogs matching the description of some of your stolen ones." Detective Gonzalez's heart raced. This could be the break they needed. "Send me the address," she said, "and don't move in until I get there." Detective Gonzalez gathered her team in the Lakewood Police Department conference room. Maps and photos covered the walls, showing the abandoned warehouse in Westville where they suspected the dogfighting ring operated. "This operation is dangerous," she told the officers. "We need Lieutenant Ramirez's help, since she was the only one who saw all the suspects at the factory." Officer Parker raised his hand. "What about Eleanor Thompson? Should we tell her?" "Not yet," Detective Gonzalez replied. "I don't want to get her hopes up if this goes wrong." But secrets are hard to keep in small towns. That evening, Officer Parker stopped by Eleanor's house to check on her security system. "How are the new locks working?" he asked, watching Duke hover protectively near Eleanor. "Very well," Eleanor said. "Duke sleeps better knowing we're secure." Officer Parker nodded, then hesitated. "Eleanor, there's something happening tomorrow night. A police operation at a warehouse in Westville. We think it might be connected to the people who took Duke." Eleanor's eyes widened. "I want to help." "Absolutely not," Officer Parker said firmly. "It could be dangerous." "Those people stole Duke and hurt him," Eleanor insisted. "I deserve to be there when you catch them." After much debate, Detective Gonzalez reluctantly agreed to let Eleanor wait in a surveillance van, safely away from the action. Her only job would be to identify voices, if needed. "You stay in the van with Officer Parker," Detective Gonzalez instructed Eleanor, "no matter what happens." The night of the operation was cold and clear. Eleanor sat in the back of the police van, watching monitors showing different angles of the warehouse. Duke had been left with Sarah, though he had whined terribly when Eleanor left. Inside the warehouse, Detective Gonzalez and Lieutenant Ramirez posed as buyers, interested in betting on dogfights. They wore hidden microphones, so the team outside could hear everything. "First time here?" asked a man with a beard. "Who told you about us?" "Kevin Walters," Lieutenant Ramirez said, using the name of the suspect they'd already identified. The bearded man nodded and led them deeper into the warehouse. Dozens of people milled around a makeshift fighting ring. Detective Gonzalez scanned the crowd, recognizing two men from the factory security footage. Then she saw him, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit talking confidently to the crowd. She recognized him immediately from community fundraisers. Richard Thompson, no relation to Eleanor. He ran a charitable foundation supposedly helping animals. "That's Richard Thompson," Detective Gonzalez whispered to Lieutenant Ramirez. "He's behind this whole operation." They moved closer, gathering evidence as Richard announced the next fight. Lieutenant Ramirez took photos using a hidden camera in her watch. Suddenly, a man approached them. "Hey, don't I know you? You were in the newspaper, the firefighter who found those dogs." Lieutenant Ramirez tried to deny it, but the man was already yelling, "We've got cops here!" Chaos erupted. Detective Gonzalez gave the signal, and police officers stormed in from all entrances. People scattered, running in every direction. In the surveillance van, Eleanor watched in horror as the monitors showed the confusion. Officer Parker's radio crackled with urgent voices. "Stay here," he told Eleanor. "I need to help my team." The moment Officer Parker left, Eleanor noticed something on one of the monitors. A side door of the warehouse had opened, and a man in an expensive suit was slipping out. Without thinking, Eleanor opened the van door and stepped outside. She just wanted to see better, to confirm if it was one of the men who had taken Duke. On the screen, Richard Thompson looked directly at the camera, and Eleanor gasped. She recognized the snake tattoo peeking from beneath his sleeve. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man who took Duke." But Eleanor had made a terrible mistake. As she stood outside the van, Richard Thompson came running around the corner, directly into her path. Startled, he stopped for just a moment. Then his eyes narrowed with recognition. "You're the old lady with the lab," he growled. Before Eleanor could run, Richard grabbed her arm and pulled her against him. She felt something cold and hard press against her temple. "Nobody move!" Richard shouted as police officers appeared. "I'll shoot her if anyone comes closer." Detective Gonzalez froze, her gun aimed at Richard. "Let her go, Thompson." "This is over." "I'm walking out of here," Richard snarled, backing toward a car with Eleanor as his shield. "And she's coming with me." With a gun pressed against her head, Eleanor felt strangely calm. Richard Thompson's arm was tight around her shoulders as he backed toward a car in the parking lot. "Let her go, Thompson," Detective Gonzalez shouted. "You're only making things worse for yourself." Police officers surrounded them, guns drawn but unable to shoot with Eleanor in danger. Richard continued backing up, dragging Eleanor with him. "One step closer and the old lady gets it," Richard threatened, his voice shaking slightly. Eleanor looked at the tattoo on his wrist, the snake that had haunted her dreams for weeks. This was definitely one of the men who had taken Duke. She remembered Lieutenant Ramirez's words about Duke's protective instinct, and suddenly an idea formed in her mind. "You're the man who stole my dog," Eleanor said quietly. "Shut up," Richard hissed. "You hurt Duke. You left him to die in that factory," Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger. "I said shut up." Detective Gonzalez was moving slowly to the left, trying to find a better position. Eleanor caught her eye and gave the tiniest nod. "You know what Duke did when you grabbed him?" Eleanor asked. "He fought back. He never gave up." Richard's grip tightened painfully on her arm. "Last warning, lady." Eleanor took a deep breath and remembered how Duke had collapsed when he was frightened at the vet's office. In one quick motion, she went completely limp, dropping her full weight downward. Surprised by the sudden dead weight, Richard stumbled forward. His gun hand moved away from Eleanor's head for just a second, but that was all Detective Gonzalez needed. She launched herself at Richard, tackling him to the ground. The gun fired during the struggle, and Eleanor felt a sharp burning pain across her upper arm. "Officer down! Officer down!" someone shouted, though in the confusion, they thought Eleanor was a police officer. Within seconds, police officers swarmed Richard Thompson, handcuffing him as Detective Gonzalez checked on Eleanor. "Are you hit?" she asked urgently. Eleanor looked down at her arm where blood was seeping through her sleeve. "Just a graze, I think." An ambulance arrived within minutes, and paramedics bandaged Eleanor's arm. Detective Gonzalez sat beside her as they prepared to take her to the hospital. "That was incredibly brave," Detective Gonzalez said, and incredibly foolish. You could have been killed." "I wasn't going to let him get away," Eleanor replied. "Not after what he did to Duke and those other dogs." At the hospital, doctors cleaned and stitched the bullet graze on Eleanor's arm. Outside her room, reporters gathered as news spread about the elderly woman who helped capture a criminal mastermind. Sarah arrived with Duke, who had been so anxious without Eleanor that the doctor gave special permission for him to visit. When Duke saw Eleanor in the hospital bed, he whined softly and gently placed his head on her lap. "It's okay, Duke," Eleanor whispered, stroking his head with her good arm. "We got them. They can't hurt anyone else now." Detective Gonzalez came in later with news. "We've arrested 17 people connected to the dog theft ring. Richard Thompson was the leader. He was using his animal charity as a cover while running illegal dog fights and ransom schemes." "Why target elderly people?" Eleanor asked. "They were looking for well-trained dogs who wouldn't be aggressive toward strangers," Detective Gonzalez explained. "And they thought older owners would be easier targets, less likely to fight back." Eleanor smiled slightly. They were wrong about that. The next morning, reporters from news channels in New York and Boston waited outside the hospital. When Eleanor was discharged, Duke walking protectively at her side, cameras flashed and reporters called questions. "Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to help capture the criminals who took your dog?" Eleanor looked at the cameras, her arm in a sling but her back straight and proud. "Duke never gave up during his capture. I wasn't going to give up either." As Officer Parker drove Eleanor and Duke home, neighbors lined the street, applauding and cheering. Signs reading, "Welcome home heroes," hung from porches and trees. "Looks like you're famous now," Officer Parker said, smiling. Eleanor shook her head. "We're not heroes. We just did what anyone would do for family." But as Duke pressed against her side, Eleanor knew they had done something important. They had shown that even the most unlikely people could stand up to evil and win. 6 months after the dramatic capture of Richard Thompson, Lakewood had transformed. Spring sunshine warmed the newly painted sign that read, "Duke's Haven," at the entrance of what had once been the abandoned textile factory. "What do you think, Duke?" Eleanor asked, adjusting her sun hat as they stood in front of the building. "It's quite different from the last time you were here." Duke wagged his tail, the special firefighter tag on his collar catching the sunlight. He wore a blue vest now that identified him as a therapy dog. The old factory had been purchased with donation money that poured in after Eleanor and Duke's story made national headlines. Where dusty machines once stood, clean kennels and play areas now housed rescued animals. The main office displayed a large photograph of Duke, taken the day he came home from the hospital. "Mrs. Thompson," called Jessica Morales, the young shelter manager. "The mayor is here for the board meeting." Eleanor patted Duke's head. "Let's go, boy. We have work to do." As honorary chairperson of Duke's Haven, Eleanor visited every day. Though she moved slower now, leaning slightly on a cane, her spirit remained strong. Duke never left her side. The shelter's conference room was filled with community leaders when Eleanor entered. Mayor Wilson stood to greet her. "The state legislature passed Duke's law yesterday," he announced proudly. "Starting next month, pet theft penalties will be tripled, and we'll have funding for security systems for elderly pet owners." Applause filled the room. Eleanor smiled, remembering how distant this victory had seemed during those dark days without Duke. Across town, Richard Thompson and his associates began serving long prison sentences. The trial had been front-page news, with Eleanor's testimony moving many jurors to tears. Every Sunday afternoon, Lieutenant Sofia Ramirez visited Eleanor for dinner. Their friendship had grown strong through shared experience. "I brought apple pie," Lieutenant Ramirez said, entering Eleanor's kitchen where the smell of pot roast filled the air. "Duke has been waiting for you," Eleanor replied, pointing to Duke, who sat expectantly by the door. "He knows Sundays are special." Together they had started a program bringing firefighters and shelter dogs together. 5 Lakewood firefighters had already adopted rescued pets. "Chief Rodriguez is thinking about taking home that 3-legged German Shepherd," Lieutenant Ramirez mentioned as they ate. "His kids fell in love with her during their last visit. Tommy Sanders, now 13, had become the shelter's youngest volunteer. His experience tracking Duke had inspired his future. "I'm going to be a veterinarian," he told Eleanor as he helped clean kennels on Saturday mornings. "Mom says I can apply for veterinary programs after high school." Eleanor received letters daily from elderly people across the country, sharing stories about their beloved pets. Many wrote about installing security systems after hearing Duke's story. "Look at this one, Duke," Eleanor said one morning, reading a letter from Oregon. "This lady says her town started their own dog watch program after hearing about you." Though she still missed Robert, Eleanor had found new purpose. Her small book about the experience, titled Duke's Guardian, had become a surprise bestseller. All proceeds went to the shelter. "You've done more in your 80s than most people do in their entire lives," Sarah told her over tea one afternoon. Eleanor shook her head. "I just did what anyone would do for family." On a warm June morning, exactly 1 year after Duke's rescue, Eleanor sat on a newly installed bench in Miller Park. A small plaque on the bench read, "In honor of Eleanor and Duke Thompson, whose courage reminds us that love knows no age." Duke rested his head on her lap, his muzzle now completely gray. Eleanor's hand, spotted with age but still gentle, stroked his fur. "Sometimes the worst days lead us to the best ones," Eleanor said softly to Duke. "Who would have thought that terrible night would bring so much good to so many?" As the sun rose higher, Eleanor and Duke began their walk home. They moved slowly now, both showing their age, but together they had created something lasting. Throughout Lakewood and beyond, pets were safer, communities were stronger, and one elderly woman had discovered that life's greatest adventures sometimes begin in its latest chapters.